and Steve will kind of go over some of those details. We can open it up for questions. And then we have some small scale plans, so if you have really specific issues like, hey, I live here, what's going on near my property, you know, we can flip to that page and kind of talk one-on-one. So that's the game plan. I want to keep it informal, so if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to ask, and you know, we want your participation. Speaking of participation, if you haven't done so before you leave tonight, it would really be very helpful if you would sign in. This is information that we provide to our funding partners. So it's just helpful to show that we have people here and not just me saying we have people here. So if you'd be kind enough, it would be very helpful. Also, housekeeping. If you go out the doors and bear to the left, men's and ladies' rooms are over there. So please make use of the facilities if necessary. And I want to thank Delran Township for hosting us this evening and making this room available. So what are the county's regional trail plans? So big picture, I have a map of the county, and this is what I call my working map. I can kind of hold it up. It's not going to show you a lot from where you're sitting, but feel free to come up and take a look at it after we go through our presentation. But this just gives you an idea of the yellow tags are showing where the county park facilities are. And the game plan, as you come up, you'll see different markers, lines showing the different proposed trails. We're looking to interconnect all of our park facilities. And that's part of our overall goal from our Parks and Open Space Master Plan. So we started back in the mid-late 90s acquiring properties for regional hub parks. Once we had those properties under our control, the county then started to develop the county park facilities, right? Amico Island, Pennington, and the others. And now we're trying to do this connective tissue and link all of those park facilities so that hopefully steps outside of your front door, you can get on the nearest county trail, and depending on how big your stomach is, you can visit every county park in Burlington County. So that's kind of the big picture goal. And just to give you an idea in terms of scale, the different regional trails that the county has identified, so the Delaware River Heritage Trail, right, running from the county border, eventually tying into Trenton, down to Palmyra, the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge. So there's that trail. The Rancocas Creek Greenway, which we're going to be talking about a piece tonight, that's going to be overall envisioned from Amico Island, where Rancocas dumps into the Delaware, all the way back to Smithville Park in East Hampton, and beyond, eventually connecting into Brendan Burns State Forest in Pemberton. We have another regional trail that runs more kind of north-south, the Kincora Railroad, the former Kincora Railroad. So that goes from the Delaware River up by the Roebling Complex in Florence and works its way down to Pemberton and ties into the Rancocas Creek Greenway near the Pemberton Rail Trail. And then we have the Arnie's Mount Trail. So in Springfield, the highest point in Burlington County, trust me, a whopping 250 feet above sea level, is Arnie's Mount. And so we're going to be doing trails around, up and around Arnie's Mount, and then kind of going off in both directions through the Farm Belt, through easements that the county owns. So it's a very, it's an exciting system. In terms of scale, we're talking about on the magnitude of like 8,500 miles in total when all is said and done. So ambitious, but we're close. As I said, we've been very aggressive in terms of acquiring properties. We've been diligent in developing our park facilities, and now with help from federal funding and other sources, we're starting to pick off big chunks of the regional trail network that we're going to be developing. So Currently, the county has about 15 miles in what I would call a pipeline, of which we have about 4 miles as part of this segment. So again, the idea is Steve is standing over here showing some existing conditions and the big picture of connecting Amico Island Park and using on-road and then off-road. The dashed line indicates off-road, the solid line indicates on-road facilities, and we'll talk about what that means. Coming across Riverside Delanco Bridge and working your way through Pennington Park, getting close to the Route 130 interchange. So that's the piece that we're talking about. We've been very fortunate, as I said, in terms of soliciting grant funds. For this project, we've been allocated a $3 million grant from federal transportation funding, which should cover 100% of the construction costs. So, not only are we getting projects kind of pennies on the dollar locally, it's going to be a great amenity for the communities at large and be a real, not only quality of life thing in terms of being able to hike and bike at your leisure, but also to bring people into our communities and visit our downtown Main Street businesses. So it's a real win-win situation in our opinion. So with that, before I turn it over to Steve, does anyone have any general questions before he goes into kind of specifics of what we're looking to do for this stretch? Okay, all right, so Steve, you want to kind of walk through what we're talking about in terms of this trail connection?
Sure. I'm going to start at Amico Island Park. The first portion of the project will be enhancing the entrance in the first few hundred feet of Amico Island Park to provide a trailhead. There'll be a few parking spaces in addition to the existing gravel area, parking area there. Some picnic tables, signage, and the trail will, and that sort of intersection at Norman will get improved to allow visitors into the park, but then also be the starting point for the trail. The first segment of the trail starts sort of on road. We have the wastewater treatment plant that's right there, and there's not much room outside of the existing cartway to get by. So we're going to widen the road a bit, and there'll be a dedicated bike lane, actually side path, on the one side that'll allow for two-way movement, but still allow for regular vehicular movements both in two directions.
So, Steve, I'm just going to interrupt you there. So when he says side path, what he's talking about is, as he said, kind of two-way pedestrian and bicyclist travel. It's a protected lane, so there are going to be plastic bollards basically protecting the users and kind of indicating to motorists, hey, I need to stay out of this, plus extra striping and line markings on the road. Can you talk about the width, Steve, for each pedestrian lane?
Yeah, the trail generally will be 10 feet wide throughout the entire length. That meets the design standards for this type of multi-user trail. So bicyclists, pedestrians, runners, jogging, basically anything other than motorized vehicles would be allowed. Any human-powered vehicle, I'm going to say, is going to be, whether it's skating or any other mode of transportation that's powered by humans would be allowed on there. So that width, it would be, as Matt was saying, would be 10 feet. There's another additional couple of feet of protected striped lane with the flexible polyurethane bollards every 5 feet to help delineate that space. Once we get right past the sewage treatment plant, we'll run up on top along River Drive there's an existing berm there, grass berm. We'll be about 6 feet off of that sidewalk, or, I'm sorry, 6 feet off of the curb, and just sort of follow along that road, which is, it's a really nice stretch of the trail. It's actually probably, it's the most direct connection to the water right there. There's not a whole lot of vegetation between the trail and the creek, so that's a really pretty spot. We'll be putting, there'll be some benches added. There'll be a little pull-off that'll have a group of benches, so that people can sit and sort of overlook the creek. There also will be crosswalk connections to the adjacent residential neighborhoods to sort of allow pedestrians to gain access onto the trail. As we move along, we get cross into Riverside Township. It's the same sort of path configuration, about 6 feet off the curb, a 10-foot wide asphalt path. We'll enter into Walmsley Field, and we're going to take the outside edge of Walmsley Field and go along that tree line of that existing park. So we'll be linking not only county parks, but we're also linking some municipal parks as well. So that'll help generate users as well. Coming around the back of Walmsley Field, we head up to the DPW site for Riverside Township. We'll cross through the back of that onto Polk Street. There's an existing abandoned bridge that was there. I don't know when that fell into disrepair, but county will put in a new 10-foot wide steel span bridge to cross over an unnamed tributary onto an unimproved section of Polk Avenue, or Polk Street, dead ends. It just is a paper street, for lack of a better word, just this long. That'll be improved to the 10-foot wide pathway that will then bring us on to the improved portion of Polk Street. At this point, will now become, it'll be an on-road trail, which will mean, for bicyclists, which will mean pedestrians will be moved to the sidewalk. The pathway will connect to the existing sidewalk. The county is going to be making improvements to those sidewalks along that length. And then bicyclists will share the road, and there will be paint markings that indicate that. Sometimes you'll see them driving around. They're becoming a little more common these days. But that paint symbol is basically an arrow in the right in the street with the bicycle symbol on it. It indicates share the road. And there'll be directional signage as well. So that will be along Polk. Pedestrians will be crossing Polk before they get to Pavilion Avenue, because there's a better sidewalk condition. And bicyclists will come all the way up to the intersection of Polk and Pavilion, at which point bicyclists would cross Polk and enter onto a bike lane. There'll be because now Pavilion's a little bit more busy, a little bit higher speed, so we're going to have a dedicated bike lane for bicyclists as they head towards the Riverside Delanco Bridge. Pedestrians would stay on the southbound side of that sidewalk, so they won't need to cross over Pavilion. They'll just stay, because the pedestrian crosswalk on the Riverside Delanco Bridge is on that southbound side. As an additional benefit of the project, we're actually going to go ahead and create a spur that links back to the Riverside train station, just so there's a little bit more of a connection to Riverside's downtown, And then we sort of increase that multimodal transportation network. So someone could bike on the train, can dismount and then get on the trail. So the trail can be used for recreation, but it could also be used just as a safer way to commute to work or to school or whatever folks are going. So continuing northbound, we'll cross over bicyclists traveling northbound. Well, right before the bridge, there'll be a mid-block crossing. Because there's no Safeway, there's no bike lanes won't be permitted on that bridge. There'll be a mid-block crossing before you get to the bridge. Bicyclists will then cross North Pavilion and walk their bikes across the bridge on the existing pedestrian crossing. Just with the age of the bridge, we're sort of limited on what we can do there. There is that existing sidewalk, and that's where we have to sort of fortunately, we have to bring everyone to that point. After crossing the Riverside-Delanco Bridge, coming up to the first intersection at Rancocas Road, once you get into Delanco, all users will cross what's now, on that side is Burlington Avenue, to get onto Rancocas. And pedestrians and bicyclists will follow along. Again, bicyclists will share the road, but again, that's a local, low volume, low speed road. There'll be that share the road as Rancocas kind of meanders. It's not a direct. There's a couple of turns along the way as you make your way to Pennsylvania Avenue, and you're basically at the foot of the River Line Bridge that crosses the Rancocas. At that point, we're going to pass underneath the River Line Bridge. After we cross under the River Line Bridge, we're going to be adding a new bridge to span a small portion of the creek and to get us up to grade on the other side. Now at this point, once we get off at the intersection of Rancocas and Pennsylvania Avenue, we then become off-road again. So it's a 10-foot wide asphalt path. And the new bridge will also be 10 feet wide. We come up to the top of this embankment and we follow along pretty much right at the top of the bank with a 10-foot wide asphalt path. There will also be a little spur trail connection to the new housing development and also to the Delanco train station, where the developers of these residential developments will have to create a pedestrian connection to meet up to our trail that was required as part of their land development approval. Our path will continue through what is now Old Farm Field and wooded, what was a few residences along here, before it connects to an existing stabilized stone path. I don't know if any of you walk that length, but it's only 6 feet wide now, and it's pretty popular and well used, but not fully compliant with the AASHTO regulations which govern this kind of development. So that existing 6-foot wide stabilized stone path will now become a 10-foot wide asphalt path, generally in the same alignment. It'll follow along that same path. So we would follow along behind the Newton's Landing development and make our way back all the way through to Pennington Park, and also utilize the existing trail alignments within Pennington Park. The remaining trails will stay stabilized, but this stabilized stone, but this main trail is coming through will now become asphalt. And there'll be a connection that reaches to the first or the main Pennington parking lot, and then also to the secondary parking lot down by the dog parks. And then there'll be a loop to return back. So this will, allow for two-way traffic. On the return trip, because Rancocas, right after, it's between, for a few blocks, Rancocas is only one way. It's basically allowing you to go east. Bicycles can't go, they have to follow the rules of the road, just like they were operating like a motor vehicle. So for that stretch, pedestrians will be able to return back the way they came, but bicyclists will be sort of detoured, and there'll be signage to this effect. It'll bring them up Pennsylvania Avenue for a block to Union to Fairview? Franklin, and then to Poplar. And then at Poplar, it'll turn back and join onto Rancocas Ave and continue back the way they came.
Will you be adding anything to that stretch of Rancocas this one way?
No, we'll be.
It's a pretty narrow stretch.
It is narrow. Unfortunately, it's privately held land on both sides, so we're kind of pinned in on what we can do. We will be replacing the sidewalks, and this whole length, we'll be getting new curb ramps. Any curb ramp that's not ADA or American with Disabilities compliant curb ramps will be getting upgraded, so there will be quite a bit of new sidewalk along there, but that's about it. There's no widening. Everything else happens within the existing right-of-way. None of these improvements are anticipated to happen on any private property. It's been designed in a way that it all happens within the right-of-way or the publicly owned portions of ground. There'll be new signage. In some cases, some of these intersections don't have stop signs and things of that nature, but so that kind of stuff will be getting added to increase safety. And there'll also be wayfinding in terms of just a Rancocas Creek Greenway logo sign, sort of a branding sign to help direct people, especially where you're having to make a couple of twists and turns, just to help to guide people back and forth. And then there will also be those traffic stripings for shared lanes or bike lanes and things that will be the other noticeable difference. And then where we do have a few trees that are lifting sidewalks in that situation, those trees will be, or we see a hazardous tree, those will be getting removed and a replacement tree planted. So there's a few of those, not many, but a few of those conditions that happen in that on-road portion, both in Riverside and Eagle Landing. So I think that's about it. And then the hope is to continue further on and link up to the next county park, which would be Laurel Run. But that's a difficult lift because we have to get over 130 or past 130 and back over the creek. So that's going to be another lift. But
We'll save that for another.
yeah, but I mean, this is significant. It's maybe some of you are familiar with like a rail to trail program where you take an old railroad right away and it's level because a train ran on it, and you just go ahead and take up the tracks and do a little bit of grading and you lay your trail down. this kind of stuff is tough. You have to, work through areas that weren't really meant, or planned for this trail. So I think the county's done a pretty good job of acquiring what they need to and finding a way, and working with municipalities. The 3 municipalities affected, Delran, Riverside, and Delanco, have all been very cooperative to make this happen. And it's the only way it would have happened, really. Otherwise, you just couldn't make these connections. It's a challenge, but it'll be great to be able to go from one park to another and have that connection.
What's your distance from Amico to,
It's 3.8 miles. It's actually probably, it's probably about 3.6, and then, when you add these spurs in, it adds up to 3.8. But
The area behind Newton's Landing, there's an outflow from the drainage basin there.
Correct.
It has quite a bit of erosion behind the abutments.
yes.
Will anything be done to stabilize that?
We are, as we cross over that, at least for the trail, we're not dealing with that culvert or any of that aspect of it, but we are, right now, it's pretty humped up as you get to that pipe. We're grading that out, so it's a much more gentle approach on both sides. In terms of dealing with any other stabilization or anything grading beyond that, we're not involved with that, but we're confident that we can get the trail through where we need to. Wherever there are those sort of drop-offs or things of that nature, we'll be adding a fence, a 42-inch high wood rail fence that is sort of the county standard that we've used elsewhere.
Then in the same area, there's a cinder path that runs up to the traffic circle. That is the end of Newton's Landing Boulevard. That's not included in any of this.
That connection will still be there, but we're not paving that.
Right, that comes in on that
Will there be any
tight.
work done on it at all? More gravel, more stone, more...
Not as part of this project.
No, that I guess is, I don't know who operates that. Is that part of Newton's Landing Homeowner Association, I guess, or?
It's either county or township property.
We'll look at, I can't remember off the top of my head on the maintenance responsibility.
Well, that I'm not familiar with, but it's not homeowner to own
We can,
or HOA.
we can take a look at that
Okay.
if that's an issue. See if we can.
It is a different surface than.
It is.
It's, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's what made me think of this,
Yeah.
something else, but we will tie into that.
We'll take a look at that. We'll follow up. Any other questions?
Yeah, if I may. It's a pretty sensitive area there on Delanco Township. And if you're going to pave, what measures for protection during the course of construction would you be taking?
Well, we had to go through significant, we did significant testing there to know what's there, and have been in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, and have had to get their approvals. So this project is only disturbing the top layer, and we've gotten clearance to do that. There's nothing of significance in that immediate top layer. It's not like we really don't have to do any piping or anything that requires deep excavation. There will be earth moving happening out there, but it's mostly.
That's one thing is you water from the 6 foot to the 10 foot and then you pave it. Like I say, it's pretty sensitive back there.
Yeah, everyone's aware,
Uh-huh.
and the state is aware too, and they have, reviewed it thoroughly. And,
What's the plan?
well, we have to stay in our area. And when we're in that area, we can only disturb so much. And
Yeah, we have
that's allowed.
limited excavation.
The capping of it with paving is actually preferred because, by the state, because then you can't really get to it afterwards. What they're most concerned about is someone disturbing something. You know, once it's sort of capped with asphalt, it's, all right, we know something's there and we're good. We don't, any of our shovel test pits didn't come up with anything where we had to divert the trail. There are really sensitive areas there that the development, previous developments had us stay away from. We're not in those impacted areas. Our area's already been, especially along that length, our area's already been impacted by the construction of the trail, the existing trail. Yes, we are widening it, but in general, it's not.
What about the, forgive me for asking, what about the water runoff, because now you're paving versus dirt?
In terms of environmental impact of yeah. When you look at, we are having to do some stormwater mitigation, but on a project like this, that's only 10 feet wide, the impact over the entire area is very de minimis, is what they would call it. Is that, area can withstand 10 feet. If I was doing a parking lot that was, gathering a larger sheet flow and concentrating water, that's a different kind of animal. But on these linear trail projects, the impact is very minimal. So they'll just be vegetated buffers on either side of the trail.
Oh, is that something that would be part of this project, will be vegetative buffers?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, and
Oh, yeah.
What would that involve, for example?
Anything that we're disturbing will be getting seeded. Immediately adjacent to the trail will be turf for, I think, 4 feet on each side. And then beyond that, it would be seeded with whatever sort of matches the condition. If we're in a wooded area, it gets a native woodland seeding. If we're in a meadow area, say more like Pennington, it's getting a meadow seeding beyond that trail. So everything gets fully restored. And then trees are planted. We're using native trees along the length. It's tough. It's a floodplain, so it's some sort of siltier soils, and the trees there aren't of the greatest quality. There are some that are very nice, and we've worked around those. And we don't expect actually much disturbance, certainly along the existing trail length, because again, we're widening it, and there's ample room.
If someone were interested in the type of vegetation that would be in that 4-foot buffer zone on each side, who would we see about that? Is there someone, because there's certain plants and different things like that that may be pollinator friendly or bird friendly or animal friendly? How would one go about
and we have
getting some input in that?
You talk to me about it,
Okay.
or to Matt, but I can tell you now, we're already using Ernst conservation mix seeds, seed mixes that have beneficial pollinator types in it. Like I said, immediately adjacent to the trail, just so that stuff doesn't grow over, there will be lawn. And then anything beyond that lawn buffer, and it's also for safety too. If someone does, whatever, have to make a motion on a bicycle to avoid a collision or something like that, that you have a shoulder that's relatively clear, there will be that. But beyond that, like I said, it will be that meadow or woodland scene. And we've done this on. We did a portion of the Concora Trail project that Matt was mentioning earlier, and it was the same situation. And that was, while this project is has culturally sensitive areas. That had very environmentally sensitive areas. And DEP worked with us on that. We did the same kind of thing, that the buffer and the Ernst conservation seed mixes with the beneficial pollinators. DEP's also reviewed this as well, from SHPO's point of view, but then also from their land use and flood hazard area. Types of hoops. Army Corps has looked at this as well.
Yeah, so Steve's kind of gone into detail on it, but the overall picture is for any federal funded project, there's, not to say that just for a local project there isn't scrutiny, but there's amped up scrutiny in terms of additional eyes and approvals that are needed for all of these areas: environmental, cultural resources, handicapped accessibility, etc. So not only has the state with the Department of Environmental Protection and the State Historic Preservation Office, but also at the federal highway and NJDOT level, they've had their environmental folks review this, and we've had to go through a significant application and review process before this could get approved. So it's met all of those standards and has been tweaked to address issues as they come up through our cultural resource investigation, et cetera. Ultimately they've given us those permits saying, yes, we've satisfied those issues and the project can continue. But definitely if you have issues with regards to potential seed mixes, et cetera, please talk to one of us after we kind of break off of the presentation mode here, and then we'll be happy to talk to you about that more specific.
Just to circle back on that, cultural resources. That area has been farmed for, or was farmed for quite some time. So that plow zone, anything that was in there is sort of all reconfigured anyway. That's the zone they let us work within, because it's already been, there's nothing.
There isn't a cohesive historical record or story in that, 12, 15-inch plow zone.
And we confirmed it with 300 shovel test pits.
Yeah.
Reaching.
At one time, I believe that 10, 12 years ago, when the path was originally talked about, I believe it was supposed to cross the railroad tracks at the station. There was something about that they had to remain 300-400 feet off of the creek because of the environmental or wetlands or whatever. I understand now the path's going to follow directly on the creek.
Yeah, pretty close.
Mm-hmm. So with regards to the crossing of the river line, so in addition to cultural resources and environmental investigations and et cetera, we also had to meet, obviously we're crossing the right of way at some point. So we had to meet with New Jersey Transit and New Jersey Department of Transportation to talk about where could the trail go. And after several meetings and discussions with them, their preferred alternative is the alternative that's in the design right now, which is that underpass.
Under the bridge.
And we can go into the weeds on those discussions, but the short answer is that was their preferred alternative, and when we had discussions with the regulatory folks, et cetera, they said, yes, it's doable if you do X, Y, and Z. And that's what we ended up doing.
having that grade separated crossing is preferred because there's
It's a no-brainer.
almost no chance of accident. If we bring them across that
Just from
grade,
their perspective.
it's, someone tries to get, there's no gates there now.
Yeah.
We might have to add gate, but it's only a gate if someone really wants to try and cross. So I think everyone thought, all right, let's try and go in.
Just for your information, they are putting a pedestrian gate
Are they?
at the station. That's expected to be in within the next 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
That's a good thing. Yeah,
Mainly for new residential units that are going here.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm surprised it was built without it.
yeah,
To be
yeah,
honest.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
J Transit's surprise.
yeah. Any other general questions? And then, like I said, we're going to hang out here and we can answer specific questions or anything else that comes up, but just anything else kind of globally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to, what would you say the anticipated construction would be, start and what kind of time?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for asking that. So where we are right now is, so after tonight, we are requesting what's called federal authorization for the project. So until we get federal authorization, right, that's who is providing the funding that we're using for construction. Until the feds authorize the project, we can't advertise for bid. So at this point, with holidays coming up, et cetera, my best guesstimate is that federal authorization is going to come sometime towards the end of this calendar year, which means we probably bid this in early 2019, say sometime over the winter. And best case would be starting construction in the spring, with construction finishing up sometime in calendar year 2019. And that's if, we don't have the weather that we've been having, and, so there are a lot of factors, but that's ballpark.
So it's a bid for
probably,
that
right.
clean
So
stuff that we did.
best case scenario, maybe a springish start and, sometime later in 2019 a completion. Thank you for that. I have to bring that up.
I'm guessing that notifications will be sent out and, affected.
Yeah, as soon as we have a contractor where it's been put out to bid, we recommended award, the feds concur with recommendation of award. Once we have a contractor on board, then we'd be reaching out and kind of notifying people, hey, here's,
We have a real schedule.
we have a real schedule and here's when we think we're going to be coming down the pipe.
And you may have said this, but what is the anticipated construction cost, design cost, the whole project?
About $3 million on the construction side.
Fingers crossed.
Signage and, just going to have signage at key intersections, is there going to be any road striping other than the bike lane, but any kind of follow the old brick road type thing, or?
We'll have, and we have the full striping plans here, so we can go into kind of what's where. But in general, when we have an on-road facility, there's, every quarter mile is the sharrow, the
Basically,
arrows.
less than that, we put it at every intersection, or just after every intersection. So if someone's turning on to the route,
They have it
they
clear.
know, all right, that's a share of the road.
Plus, we're going to have informational, directional signage.
There'll be wayfinding signage
Yeah.
that will, on busier roads, that'll be sort of the standard green and white signs that you might see that say downtown or, Riverline, those kinds of things. But through the neighborhoods and everything, there'll be more of a branded, smaller scale sign so that pedestrians know, all right, if I'm
I've walked a block and
I can
I'm
walk,
at
I
the
can turn.
intersection, where do I go to stay?
You know,
on
there'll
the
be
trail?
that signage so that in both directions, people will be able to make their way. That's the only way this whole thing happens.
Well, the trail turn-offs after you cross the Winter Riverside Bridge, turning right at the meeting right over Rancocas. And I was in the previous 2 meetings that we had over the last year or so. And I think we had started pushing that down to either Franklin or Bonnie and making them turn there, because coming off the bridge, it's a little bit of a blind intersection there, coming off the bridge. And we wanted to move that crossing over for the trail another block or 2 for a little bit better visibility. And I think we had some constraints because Franklin's one way coming out, it's going the wrong direction.
Yep.
That's correct.
And it's a skinny street anyhow. And is there any, in the reverse flow, you've got the return flow coming back out that way too. And I think in our previous meetings, what I recollect is that we had split that and had the return crossing a block or 2 down.
Yeah,
Again, for a little distance there.
the problem with that is, like you said, is it would be contra flow on Franklin.
Yeah.
Because it's one way off of Burlington.
Right.
And we need to come back out that way. It wasn't insurmountable. We actually had designed a solution to it. It wasn't ideal for 2 reasons. One, it really pushes people out into the neighborhood, and really intuitively, you kind of want to, especially if you came this way, you want to kind of go back the same way as much as you can. The second thing is Burlington Avenue is busy, and it would have required putting, more bike lane, and it's really narrow there. There's really
Yes,
not much shoulder there.
right.
So that is its own sort of safety concern as well.
Well, the other thing that I want to bring up while you're talking about this is the county has purchased a corner lot on the inside of that curve where Burlington Avenue curves around there, with the idea of flattening out that curve to let the speeds, be maintained. And so if you want to talk to the county highway folks and say, let's ixnay on that and keep things slow, and we'll take the building.
I wish we had that much sway.
Yeah.
No, whatever.
But I
It's
mean,
just, you're working at cross
yeah,
purposes there.
sure. And I will go and talk with them. But they were also involved in this. I mean, believe me, besides your meetings, we had a ton of meetings
Oh, I
with them.
know.
And we went back and forth, we really did. I mean, that was kind of a very tricky location in terms of exactly how to wind it. And that, after a lot of back and forth, that's for the reasons that Steve talked about and a few more, we ended up coming up with this alignment.
And there is an existing crosswalk there now. There's
On the
curb.
far side of that
Right.
near
Right.
intersection.
It's kind of a weird, there's an offset intersection.
Yes.
Yeah,
So we're basically
we're gonna be.
taking the near side and crossing, but it aligns with the far side of Rancocas. So it's the best of an odd situation.
I don't know if it's in your budget, but there's crosswalk, signs that light up, someone can hit a button and
Right.
just because the traffic does fly off that bridge fairly quickly, and like I said, it is a bit of a blind intersection there.
Yeah, I know that, maybe we could take a look at it. I know the engineers took a look at it, traffic engineers, for sight distances and all that. But, the reality is, people move at a certain rate, but they put in design factors as well, because really, the speed limit is 15 miles an hour is the posted speed limit there. I don't think anyone, I don't even think
After being out
bicycles,
there for a long
I don't
time,
think
I
bicycles
don't
do
think we-
15.
Right. We didn't see a lot of people doing 50.
Now,
But we've raised that, and that's been looked at. Any other questions or comments?
Like I said, we're going to hang out here for a while. We've got plans, small-scale plans of the project. Like I said, if you haven't signed in, please do so. I also have business cards here, so please feel free to take them if any other questions come up after tonight. There's my email, my phone number, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But again, I want to thank you all for coming out. Great comments, very helpful. Hopefully this was helpful, giving you an idea of what we're looking to do, and we're very excited about this project and looking forward to being in your communities and providing these improvements. So thank you again for being here tonight. We'll hang out as long as you'd like us to answer your questions, and otherwise, have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.